Hello, everyone. I have got a great show for you today. I can't wait to talk about it. The show came out recently, and it's just unfair how underwatched this movie is right now. When you watch it, you'll know what I'm talking about because this show keeps you on your feet the whole time. So we'll talk about it. But first, I want to ask you a question. Are you one of those who, while watching a crime show or a murder mystery, try to find clues? Do you also take notes of the evidence and the interrogation scenes? If the answer is yes, then you're going to love today's recommendation. So, today I'm recommending a show which has not one, not five, but 10 murder mysteries for you to solve. So, I completed the show literally like last night, and I immediately knew that I want to recommend this on the channel. Because to be honest, they've stopped making shows like this. And I'm not saying this because it's the recommendation of the week. They literally don't make anything like this anymore. Like a show that feels episodic, something that feels more like television and not a narrative driven movie. I'll talk more about this later. And the second reason why I want to recommend this is because the show is so much fun. I really can't understand how a show which keeps you thinking every step of the way be this underwatched. Maybe because it's not streaming on a very famous platform like Netflix or something. But trust me, if this show was streaming on Netflix, it would have been trending in no time. So, the show that we're talking about this week is called Poker Face. And the reason why it's called Poker Face is because our protagonist, who's played by the gorgeous Natasha Lyonne, has the ability to find out whether a person is lying or not. So we see her as a gambler in the pilot episode, and we find out that she's blacklisted from all the casinos because they think she's cheating. But she's not cheating, she just has this ability. She's just this human litmus test, human lie detector or something. A pretty cool ability to have in a murder mystery show, right? Like, you would think that somebody who's investigating crimes would just interrogate the suspect and then find out if that person is a killer or not just by asking them. But it's not that easy in the show. This actually right now reminds me of One Punch Man. When I heard about the premise, my main doubt was like, if this guy can defeat people just by one punch, how is the story not ending immediately? How is the show not boring? But just like One Punch Man, even here the answer is not that easy. And we'll find out in some time why that's the case. So, like I said, she can figure out who's lying and who's truthing just by asking them questions. So, in these 10 episodes, we see her roaming around the country, and she gets to use this ability because wherever she travels, she always finds herself in the middle of a crime that has happened. Now, a bit of a digression here. My favorite mysteries are the ones that keep me in the loop. I want to know what's happening. I don't like when the reveal happens and they talk about something which hasn't even been talked about, which hasn't even been brought up before. It's like if you're introducing new things in the reveal segment, then you do feel a bit betrayed. So, my favorite ones are where you're exploring things with the investigator. You're always in the loop. You're always with the cop or the detective who's looking into the crime or the mystery. So my favorite ones in this genre would be The Thin Man from 1934 or 35 or something. Charade, starring Audrey Hepburn and Cary Grant, another slick comedy whodunit. Kahani, which anyone who doesn't know about should definitely check it out. It's a great murder mystery which has such a satisfying payoff. You will never guess the climax. And there's obviously the recent Knives Out movies. Like, I would say both of them are great, and both of them fall in this genre of keeping us in the loop. So now these movies, they don't take us for granted. You accompany them, and that's what I find great about them. And Poker Face is exactly that. If you love these kind of movies, Poker Face is a show which is made specifically for you. So you are with Charlie the whole time, and sometimes, trust me, sometimes you're so involved in the investigation that you would find yourself yelling at the screen towards her to look at a certain place that she might have missed. You're actually that engrossed in it. But I know what you're asking me. Isn't this true for all murder mysteries? So, what makes Poker Face different? There is a murder that happens. Charlie's looking for the killer, and obviously, the killer gets nabbed in the end. This happens in almost all mysteries in this genre. So, what makes Poker Face different? Well, there's one teeny tiny exception that makes Poker Face stand out, that makes Poker Face just the fucking best. And that trope is that in the beginning of every episode, we find out who the murderer is. And not just that, we find out how the crime took place and what made the killer kill the victim. Everything. The murderer, we find out, we actually get to see what happens before the crime happened and how the killer tries to cover their tracks. Everything, every single thing. Now, I'm pretty sure that we haven't seen anything like this in a murder mystery where you know more than the character who's tracking the killer. And I feel like this is such a bold move from the writers. And I'll tell you why it's not just a gimmick, and it's actually very, very bold for them to write a trope like this. So, there's this rule in writing that the main character should not spend much time not knowing what the viewer already knows. So the protagonist always needs to know more than the viewer. This is how the intrigue builds. This is how we are always interested in the story because we always think that there's something that we are yet to discover. So the protagonist cannot spend a lot of time not knowing what we already know. And this is what most of the murder mysteries follow. And this is why I think people like watching mysteries and thrillers is because they want to be surprised. They don't always want to see the protagonist being surprised about things that they already know about. And that's why I feel Poker Face revealing everything in the first few minutes is a really daring decision. So they've taken this trope and said, we're going to do exactly the opposite of this and still manage to keep it interesting. So now that we know about the murder, the question is, where does the mystery come from? We know everything: what happened, who the killer is, how they covered their tracks. Now, obviously, the question is, where is the mystery, right? How do they keep us intrigued after revealing everything in the first few minutes? And the answer to that is the question that I asked you at the start of this video. Do you also search for clues? Because when in the first few minutes we witness the crime, it looks like a perfect murder with no loopholes at all. But the catch, as you know, is that there's no such thing as a perfect murder. And there are loose ends that the killer leaves. And this is where we and Charlie come in. The mystery is not who did it, the mystery is how do we prove that they did it? Isn't that amazing? You being so involved in the story that you try to find out what is it that the killer is doing wrong while they're committing the murder. When I understood the trope, like you obviously understand that in the second episode, because the first episode is them introducing the pattern to us as to what happens and how it happens and everything. By the second episode, you already know the pattern. So at this point, you're just keenly looking at the murder while it's happening and trying to figure out what is it that can get the killer caught. And this is where Poker Face scores big. So every episode, this is the pattern. A new setup, it can be like a lover's quarrel, rivalry, property disputes, anything. you know. So the crime happens that only we get to see. And when the killer gets away, Charlie comes in. She is somehow always in the middle of it, not involved in the crime, but she is somewhat connected to the characters, either the victim or the killer or whoever. So that's the pattern. The crime happens, Charlie comes in, and she figures out things that are not what they look like, and she starts investigating. As you know now, she has this instinct where she can feel that something is going wrong. So that's why she starts investigating. So through this investigation, we find out a few more things. And this is where we come in, where we are expected to find out what's the loose end. So when the final reveal happens as to what was the loose end that the killer left behind, it feels, trust me, guys, if you find out the loose end, it feels so validating to know that we have figured it out way before anyone else. Like, for example, there's this episode where we find out that there's a guy who has been framed and he had a gun on him when he left the casino. But somewhere in the middle of the episode, we see footage of him leaving the casino and the security detector doesn't go off. So you immediately find out that he does not have the gun with him. So he's not the killer. So it is a blink and you'll miss kind of scene. But if you notice it, you like that Leo DiCaprio meme from Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, him pointing at the TV. You're exactly like that when you spot it. And again, it feels so validating when at the end of the episode, Charlie realizes the same thing and uses it as evidence against the actual killer. And because of moments like this, Poker Face feels fresh. I have not seen anything like this. And the reason why I said they don't make TV like this anymore is because TV, as we know, it is starting to compete with movies, right? And that's why everything these days is narrative driven, which is great in its own way. But if you have seen TV shows before 2010, you would notice that every episode used to be a separate story, like Suits or Supernatural. Like they would have a main story that would run in the background, and then you would have a standalone storyline, which an episode would be particularly focused on. Like in Supernatural, the main story is where the brothers are tracking down their father. But in every episode, they would encounter new supernatural beings. Or in something like The West Wing, where every episode would be about a challenge that the White House officials are facing. Sometimes struggling to get same sex marriage legalized, but also sometimes struggling to decide which turkey they should be pardoning during Thanksgiving. So that kind of television they have stopped making these days. And with Poker Face, I thought it was so clever of them to adapt this format and give 10 murder mysteries in a single show. Maybe even more if they decide to make more seasons. Oh, and I forgot to mention one thing. This show is made by Ryan fucking Johnson. He's the director of Knives Out movies, if you don't know about him. And there are a lot of cameos. There's Joseph Gordon Levitt, who has done a few movies with Ryan Johnson. You should check out Brick if you haven't seen another great murder mystery. He is the master of murder mysteries right now. So yeah, there's Joseph Gordon Levitt, there's Adrian Brody in the pilot episode. So yeah, there are some really cool cameos. But who are we kidding? The MVP here, Natasha fucking Leon. I'm so glad she's finally getting a due from playing a side character in the American Pies to kicking ass as a supporting character in Orange is the New Black. She is finally doing some great lead roles. First, it was Russian Doll, and now she has Poker Face. She kills in every scene. She is so funny. She is so funny in every scene that she's in, and she's in every scene. So that's a big enough reason for you to watch Poker Face. My top three episodes would have to be episode 2, episode 3, and episode 7. When you watch it, I really want to know what are your favorite episodes. Apart from that, our other videos are also waiting for you to be explored. We are gonna be doing a few TV shows for the next few weeks. We have done a lot of TV shows in the past few weeks. We did Succession, we did Ted Lasso. We're gonna do a show next week as well, which we categorize in the marvelous genre. Wink, wink. Till then, you can have a great weekend, and I think you'll have a great one if you choose to watch Poker Face. So stay safe, and I'll see you next week. Bye bye.